Hello, hello, hello. Test, test, test. Just making sure everyone can hear me here. Just wait for everyone to jump in. I can see some questions already, so I wanted to say that if you guys are going to ask questions, we'll have someone in chat potentially asking them. One thing to remember though, and we'll always harp on about this, don't give out your recovery phrase. Don't put any recovery phrase into anything that is purporting to be Ledger Live. So just something to keep in mind. We'll never ask that of you as well, but we'll try to answer all your questions too, if you want to pop those in the chat. But what I really wanted to go through today, because I have been seeing a lot of this in particular with some customers, is address poisoning. And it's something that I think it might be really scary initially when you see these transactions happening in your instance of Ledger Live. Now, and that's why I went through the initial bit about the recovery phrase, is because that's going to be the backup, and that's going to be the main way that you know that you're the only person that can potentially sign transactions for a specific address or account. You're going to, normally use your ledger to do so, and so if you're getting your addresses, and this is, I think, what I'm not going to show you how to do it, but I think this is something that will come up for users if you're feeling, maybe you're feeling a little lazy, and I wouldn't recommend you do this as well at all. Rather, feeling a little lazy, you don't want to go through the receive process on Ledger Live to get your address. If you go and just copy this address here, then you don't know that that's going to be your address, and this is part of what could be happening for some users. And there are a lot of I wanted to go in through all the potential things that might be happening. If you are just doing that and you're whitelisting that address and sending to that address, that's definitely not a secure way to go about it. This is definitely not what I would recommend. This isn't my account, by the way. This is just a kind of a way to view some particular accounts here. But yeah, if I'm going to receive funds from an exchange, for example, I'm going to want to go through the receive process to make sure that the address that I'm interacting with is going to be the one that I'm sending to is going to be the correct one. There's no, hopefully you'll make sure that the digits are correct and that there's no malware. One thing that I don't mention often enough actually would be that there's actually a help center for that in particular. Ledger support, and we actually have an article about that with regards to address poisoning and things like that as well. So it's definitely something to check out. I might want to go through this couple of those questions as well, because they are I'm quite interested to see what we have. So just quickly in between that, Golem mining, I tried to sell ETH on Ledger Live, wouldn't allow me. That is correct. One thing, that Ledger Live is a way for you to interact with your cryptocurrency accounts. So if you're going to sell Ethereum, Bitcoin would be a pretty similar process. You would need to interact with a third party or a service. Personally, for me, for example, I could use something like Binance. I've used I think Mount Pelerin before, and these are services that you potentially could use to have that money be sent either to, like in Europe it'll be like, I think it's SEPA. There's one for Australians as well, and I know in US there's wiring numbers that you can potentially provide, or hopefully I think in some cases you might even be able to have that go to your card. But it's definitely something you'll need to check with a third party. It wouldn't be something that we'd be able to do with the Ledger device or anything like that. It's there to hold like your private keys so that you can manage the assets that cryptocurrency assets that you might hold. So with you saying you sent it to Binance, it's probably what I would have done. for USD, but it's annoying. Didn't know there was a way to sell or not on there. Within Ledger Live are the other ways. I think there are some potential apps, because it does depend on your area as well, about where what might be available to you, Column. So if I remember correctly, there was one service that was relatively recently added. I think it'd be Bitty, that you can buy and sell as well. So for at least for us, those of us in the Eurozone. So it might depend on your location as well. I mean, I think especially in somewhere like New York, it's actually quite more restrictive than a lot of other places, is my understanding. In any case, RPM87 mentions, hey, your ledger won't charge, getting an error and it won't hold a charge. Get a hold of us. Now, if you're getting a hold of us, remember just to do it at support.ledger.com. That's the easiest way to go about trying to get a hold of us, and we'll try to assist you with that. We do have a lot of requests, as you can see in our banner here, so it might take a little while, but we're trying to get to everyone as quickly as we can. That is something we can help with regards to, potentially can help with regards to the cannot charge error. With regards to, like, if you know, you still need to manage your accounts in the meantime, it might be good just to consider, you know, what other potential workarounds that you might need depending on the tokens that you're trying to manage and send. So just something to consider. Okay. When will the Nano X, let me just open you up, put that up a bit, HW, be able to add it to MetaMask Mobile. With MetaMask Mobile, I know it's coming. We've said it's been coming for some time now. It's not something that I think we're waiting, something that we need to integrate necessarily. I think we're waiting on MetaMask, and is my understanding, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'm really waiting for that feature to come out as well. I'd love to give you a timeline, but I wouldn't have an exact one in particular. But I'm really excited for that feature and for more mobile native stuff to come for the Ledger devices. That is something that I'm really stoked to see. And this is part of what I did want to discuss today. Mentions, how can I stop hackers from sending me fake coins to my wallet? Is your stacks with colored screens in later versions? That I can't answer. I don't know anything about any later versions, if there are any or anything, but at the moment it's a black and white screen. But I wanted to address your first question with regards to the whole thing is going to be relatively about, you know, address poisoning in particular. It's one of the things that I'm seeing a lot of recently, and it could be a bunch of things, right? It could be, you know, NFTs that have been sent to and from your account, right? You think, how could they even send from? And we're gonna have to discuss like how the smart contracts work in general before it's easier to get a better understanding of why that's even possible in the first place, and you know what the devs on our side are hoping to do about it or considering. So, for example, I've got this account here, and these are all NFTs except the Infinity Pass, and I don't even know if that one, so we can check, right? But all of these top ones for sure, I didn't ask for, they was just sent to me. I can't stop them from being sent to me. When someone creates a scam NFT, I don't know what this one is in particular. Generally, it's made with the intent that you're going to want to interact with it, right? They want to be like, hey, you can, maybe I'm going to transfer this or send it or receive it or whatever. And when you interact with a smart contract, you could execute any potential arbitrary code from that NFT. So we can't stop, whether they're NFTs, tokens, anything like that, we actually can't stop anyone from sending us tokens. Our addresses are public on chain, so it's not something that we can actually stop in particular. But how do we mitigate this, or how do we, because it is annoying to be able to see this. You can hide NFTs at the moment, and so this is something that I normally recommend. I wouldn't recommend, sending it to a different wallet or anything like that. Just hide it. Don't interact with it on chain. Don't do anything with it. Now, this is not currently something that you'd potentially be able to do for something else that might happen, which is when you see transactions of a value of 0, for example, with when you're interacting with stable coins. So let's say DAI, USDC, USDT, and you're seeing these transactions that are going in, out of 0. So maybe, I don't know, I think this is actual value, yeah. But if, let's say this was 0 and then there was in, out, in, out, in, out, and I didn't do those. This is another type of, it's more malicious than spam in particular, because it's in the hopes of you interacting with it. They're going to try and get you to, I think I mentioned the scenario before, of you sending funds from an exchange to your address, and if you're feeling a little bit lazy, for example, and you're going to copy an address in from your latest operations, and it's something that it really highlights the importance that if you're interacting with an address, whitelisting it, anything like that, generally best to go through the receive process. You get your ledger device. You make sure to export the public keys essentially for a particular account that you want to receive to, and that way you're making sure to receive it in the correct address. We can't, because of the way that the ERC20 tokens are implemented. I think we were having a look at this the other day, so I can actually go into, let's go to Etherscan USDC. Actually, no, it's ERC20. If I check the interface for the ERC20 token, which is essentially just like, what are the functions that we can use to interact with an ERC20 token? Let's open Zeppelin. Let's just use Open Zeppelin's one, seeing as I want to get. What we're going to see is actually that the way it's implemented is that the requirement for the approval is of you have to have a specific amount of approval to be able to manage these assets. If the approval though is 0, then and the transaction is for 0, then the transaction is able to be processed, right? And so because of that, that's why you're able to see these transactions. They're not going to change your balance at all. Let me actually find this first. So emits an approval, boom. Let me find the GitHub. But essentially, that's kind of why it seems to be like, that's why it's coming up. You can see Etherscan has essentially gone about and marked these as like fake phishing accounts, because we can tell, right? They're performing multiple calls on a specific ERC20 token. They're doing it to lots of different accounts, and they're wanting to do that. My understanding at this point is that we don't want to censor anything on chain, but we definitely want to make it so that these transactions aren't going to affect our users. So it's definitely something that I know has been brought up internally to try and either change the way that they're displayed or something along those lines. I'm not sure what the preference is, but it's all to say that it's going to be really important if you are going to be, sending and receiving, especially big amounts or something like that. If it's like from an exchange, or if you're having to copy and paste an address, don't do so with this. Please, please, please make sure you go through the receive process, or make sure you know exactly which address you're interacting with. That's, I think, really the big thing that I need to stress the most, is that as long as you're not just copying and pasting random addresses to send in to and from, thinking that you're always going to be that secure, always going to be 100% secure, like copying it straight from here is not going to be the most secure way of doing things. You're going to want to make sure you go through the receive process. That way you know address that was generated from the device is going to be the one that you'll be able to receive it to. Hopefully you could double check that when you copy and paste and everything like that as well. So I know it was a bit of a long rant about that, but it's definitely something that I want you guys to avoid. You know, people that have lost, or I've seen cases where people have lost a large sum of money just because they might be doing that. Maybe you're feeling you're sending this, you've sent it 1,000 times, why would it, copying pasting it, be bad? So it's really important just to make sure you're always checking the first digits of the address, last couple digits of the address. When I mean a couple, I mean like I can be up to 5, or you just check the whole thing. It'll avoid any potential issues in the future going forward with regards to sending to the wrong address if you have malware and things like that. So I hope we can maybe get to some more questions if possible. Let's just go down to the bottom. I know one of my colleagues has been answering those, but I'm always going to be talking a lot about, you know, how to keep making sure that you guys are safe when you're, you know, interacting using your Ledger device. If you're going about and, you know, using any third-party dApps and things like that, what you might need to consider to stay safe. Looks like who has some more questions in particular. I'll just answer the last one. If I buy stacks, can I add stacks onto Ledger Live? So I have 2 wallets in one Nano, one stack, one Nano X and one stacks. You can indeed, 100%. In fact, even now, if you have a Ledger Nano S, Ledger Nano S Plus, or if you have like 10, 20 devices, you can all manage them in the same instance of Ledger Live. I think it's one thing that I don't think maybe a lot of, maybe some users maybe don't consider as often. If you do have a lot of accounts added and a lot of devices, go about and you can, these are test addresses that I've added, but I can go add, I could change the name for this to be, you know, BTC1, and this could be my LNX, for example. And then if I go about and I change it for another address and go on and I've cancelled it, but essentially you would go about and rename all of your accounts, and in doing so, you know, you'll be able to know and keep track of which one's which and stuff like that. If you ever need to, if you have some, you know, requirement for secrecy as well, which I know can come up, you can also like make sure to remove it after you're done managing the assets, and then you can add it back in later. I think this is a really good example of something that you might do if you're managing passphrase accounts. So if you need to send from a passphrase account, you know, you don't need anything special to send to any account in particular, but if you're using a passphrase account, maybe you want to send from, so you go through maybe to add the process of adding an account down here so that you can therefore manage the assets at that address. Who you mentioned you were trying to swap boom, baby Doge to BSC. So baby Doge, right? So this is always something that I'm going to consider when swapping any assets, right? Okay, so baby Dogecoin. We're going to consider what network we're sending it on. You're sending it to Binance Smart Chain. I'm not 100% sure actually on what chain baby Doge is on. I thought it might be on Ethereum as a ERC20 token as well, but no. Okay, so you're trying to swap to baby Doge that is already on the Binance Smart Chain token. Who my next thought would be, what is the next? What are you switching from? I'm going to double check if you've actually already mentioned it, but depending on what you're switching from, so let's say it's wrapped BNB. If you're switching from wrapped BNB on the Binance Smart Chain, there's not any bridge that you need to interact with, but you might need to swap with either a centralized exchange or a decentralized exchange. My first what on Binance Smart Chain, PancakeSwap is the one that comes to mind for that kind of swap, and you know, you could use that and you can connect your wallet with a third-party app like you know, MetaMask, Wallet Connect as well, to actually manage these assets. And you can swap whatever you want and things like that. Of course, good to do your research on what on what might be safe, because there's always going to be potential scams out there. But yeah, that's what I would consider Hoohoo with regards to that. Boom. Okay, just going to see if there's any more general questions in the chat. But again, I wanted to talk again continuously about what seems to be happening more and more often with users is that we're seeing their accounts having users being sent and let's say NFTs, interactions with ERC20 tokens that they didn't do. And it's important, remember guys, that these don't affect the security of your account. You know, just because someone's doing these $0 transactions, so zero, they're not sending or receiving any amount in particular, but they're showing up. They don't affect you as long as you haven't, you know, compromised your recovery phrase, or someone doesn't have access to both the ledger device and the PIN code. So I think those are probably the main things to consider to make sure that you're not. It's the main thing to consider to make sure that you're not copying and pasting addresses in here. These are NFTs that you see. I'm going to go to that Polygon account again because that has a lot of these ones that I know for sure I didn't want to interact with, and they just were sent to me, right? I'll show you right now how we could potentially hide them as well to make sure that they don't show up at all and stuff like that. So let's go to, I think you mentioned, Natalia, you also mentioned, you know, sending, receiving onto their ledger. Is that safe? It definitely is safe. I think it's an interesting topic that I can talk about a little bit while I'm, you know, hiding some random NFTs for you guys. Is that the way that the ledger device is designed is designed that you don't actually have to trust the computer that you're interacting with as well. It's quite an interesting thought to that. Like, if you know that your laptop is compromised, is it something that you can still continue to, you know, manage your assets with? And, you know, if you're doing things in the correct way, there's no reason why you still couldn't at least, you know, send a transaction. You'd have to make sure, you know, you're signing exactly what it is. Exactly what you're signing is exactly what you know and trust, but it is potentially possible. It's not something that you might experience every day, of course. Okay, so if, let's say, I don't know what this Stoned Ape Limited is, so limited edition, I'm assuming. You see, I right click and can hide the NFT collection. It actually takes some effort. We're going to hide them one by one. I might actually put in some feedback to that so that we can do this more than once at a time. That would be quite nice. But in essence, these NFTs we don't want. I've never seen what this one is or this one is, so I'm just going to right click and hide them, and that way I don't interact with them on chain. We don't touch them at all. We just don't see them within our instance of Ledger Live going forward. A couple of additional questions that have come up. Brazen of KP, I moved over my VeChain, but I couldn't see my tokens in my ledger. How come? One thing you can double check, and this is what I would suspect, is that the tokens on VeChain are not supported in Ledger Live. Yep, Jonathan, you mentioned it right there. So that would be the most likely thing that I would consider. Doesn't mean that you wouldn't be able to manage it with any other third-party assets, third-party services. If you specifically wanted to manage VeChain asset tokens in particular, potentially Sync might be able to help you in terms of managing those assets as well. Yeah, exactly. Jonathan's mentioned that exactly as well. So that's a potential way you can do that if you wanted to. Ron Hart, I know you asked, how do you double check your 24-word passphrase? Now, it does also depend on how you've set up your passphrase as well, to how you would want to check it. If you've set it up as being attached to a pin, you can, go through enter the pin that you attached it to, and then you can go through the receive process. So that was within Ledger Live. I'll just receive to this particular account, and then you can go from there and make sure that my first index Ethereum address matches this passphrase, right? So I can know that this passphrase begins with 0x111. And then therefore going forward, when I have access to that account, that is that passphrase that it's associated with. There's no specific way to say like, hey, you're using passphrase AAAA or ABCD or whatever it might be. We'd want to keep, because the passphrase, the way that it's set to be used isn't so that it's like extra secure in particular when someone's trying to actually access the device itself, but it's more so in relation to plausible deniability. Someone's trying a wrench attack on you, and you can say, hey, these are my assets, as opposed to these are actually my assets. So depending on which one you wanted to use, I think there are benefits between either. The benefits between using either the passphrase as your plausible deniability or your main accounts as your plausible deniability, and so on and so forth. Boom. Okay. Any update on KDA? Razul? No. Yes. Colleague has mentioned just to follow us on Twitter for nearly all updates. We try to be as proactive as we can there to try and communicate with you guys as well. So please get a hold of us there. For the live, so Tom Calm, I'll answer PowerFlip first. Can you buy and sell crypto from Ledger? You can buy and sell crypto from Ledger Live. You can do it outside Ledger Live. You can do it with your Ledger device and without your Ledger device, without a Ledger device as well. So it just depends on what kind of method you wanted to use to buy and sell crypto, and how you're paying for the crypto as well. For example, you can use the buy and sell tab here. It may only support specific amounts of crypto, so it's something to consider what is supported for your specific area. You can use third-party services like Binance as well, so there are definitely options in particular. But Tom Calm mentions opinion on staking on DeFi sites. Some coins that you cannot stake on Ledger, so Dogecoin. So in terms of opinions, it's going to be the ones that I use are very specific to what my risk tolerances are, what I prefer to do, and how I want to implement my funds. So I'm not sure about, if you're more specific, we can maybe even take a look. Obviously, there's no financial advice or anything like that in particular that we can give you to say, hey, this is going to make money or something like that. But it's more so just to say, hey, as long as I think you're not importing your recovery phrase into any third-party dApp, you're generally going to be safe. Not always, in fact, because you might sign a transaction that's purporting to be one thing that isn't. So that is something that you might need to keep in mind when you're signing transactions on some sketchy DeFi site. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. I can't give you like a black and white answer unless we're more specific, I think. I did see team said A0 integration is under processing. When is it done? I wouldn't be able to give you any specific time frame, unfortunately. You can always jump on the Discord as well. There is a Discord that we do have. You can have a chat with them, but yeah, I wouldn't be able to give you a time frame for any integrations, fortunately. Mahmood, same thing as well. Wish I could give you guys those definite dates, but we'll always announce them on Twitter when they're all going live and stuff like that. Yeah, Tom Gunn, in terms of doing it, I totally understand, and there's one thing that you could do. I mean, if you do want to interact with them but you're not sure, if there is some amount of funds that you are okay with losing. You could potentially use a different account. So you add a different account, send money there, and then you can use that to interact with it. What this mitigates in particular is that when you're signing transactions, this mostly goes with Ethereum based, so account based blockchains. But if you're interacting with a service, a DeFi service, and let's say it's Aave, because this is one that I use a lot personally. When I'm using Aave, you might want to use this with your, let's say this is some sketchy site for the first time, you jump in and you log in, right? You don't know what's going to happen or anything like that. So when you do, you could use this new account that you've added within Ledger Live. I know we haven't added a new one. But let's say this is a new account. We had sent funds there, and then we connect with this new account that we've funded, and that way you can actually mitigate any funds that could be pulled out. Specifically, when you've signed a transaction that's not what it claims to be, and that way, these patterns where you've got approval for all, or where it's just flat out transferring funds from your account, for example, those are going to only affect the account that you've just created. So even if you end up doing so, you can kind of mitigate the damage if that were the case. And this kind of connects to really understanding, like, when you're interacting with these DeFi protocols, what you're interacting with, what's actually happening behind the scenes, and just making sure, this is my personal opinion about making sure you understand what you're interacting with when you're doing so. Carol mentions, can you move USDC Polygon account to Ledger? Now, I could interpret this in a couple of ways. So first thing would be, you can. USDC is something you can manage on the Polygon network with a Ledger device, yes. If you want to receive USDC on the Polygon network to a Ledger controlled address, you definitely can, Carol. That's 100%. Now, if you hold USDC on a Polygon account already, so let's say with a software wallet, and you want to move it to a Ledger controlled address, you can definitely do so as well. It's an on-chain transaction. I'm sure that might have been something you've done before. You just need your Matic or Polygon to pay for the transaction fees to send that ERC20 token from one account to another. So that should be relatively simple. Otherwise, if you specifically wanted that specific account, so I've got a software wallet account, let's say in MetaMask or Trust Wallet or whatever, we don't normally recommend this, but it's possible to input your recovery phrase into your Ledger device to then manage as well. The reason we don't recommend it is because if your computer was already compromised and you were interacting with these tokens, they hadn't taken any funds out, and then you input this into the Ledger device, and because the recovery phrase is already compromised, you wouldn't be able to be sure that you're the only one that can sign transactions for those addresses. So someone else can manage your those assets at any time. So those are the things that I would consider with regards to sending USDC. It's just about where you're sending it from. If it's an exchange, just got to know which network you're sending it on, and then it's about knowing which account, how to get the address that you're going to input into an exchange. If it's a third-party service like a Changelly, for example, you also need an address if you're interacting with it outside Ledger Live. So yeah, just some things to consider if you're doing that with a centralized exchange, something like that. All right. Tom Calm, is there any chance that you add soon more flexible staking earn options on Ledger Live? That is always something that I think we're hoping to do. So if you have any suggestions, definitely let us know. We can always pass those along. If I'm honest, there's not even a requirement that you have to do them. within Ledger Live, but I do understand that there is a certain, sometimes there is a feeling of wanting to stay within the ecosystem to make sure that that the requisite security measures have been taken, right? But as long as I think there is a big world out there of DeFi that can be harnessed without just being exposed to the price fluctuations that you get just from holding assets in the cryptocurrency space. So I think it's interesting to think about. I definitely know that there already are really good options in terms of staking, like for example Lido, good liquid staking is on here already as well. So it's like there are definitely options there. I know that there are definitely hundreds and thousands of different options that are out there. So it can all take some time for them to integrate with us to integrate and everything like that. But you can always get a hold of those devs as well to get a hold of us. We can help them integrate. Directly connecting your Ledger Live into a dApp, for example, is something we can help with. Boom. Okay. Thank you for a 0 4 to 5 months. Is this something normal? So I don't think necessarily there's anything that might be wrong, but I definitely know with regards to when they're doing security checks, is that the team does do a very thorough job. They want to make sure they account for everything, and so it can take a long time in particular. So it's definitely not something necessarily like that I can't give you an exact time frame because they want to make sure they account for everything in particular. Boom. Okay. My Animist, you mentioned you're a bit confused. If we can help, hopefully we can. Michael mentioned it's possible to transfer all ERC20 tokens you hold on Binance to your Nano S Plus device via Binance Smart Chain. 100%. It is definitely possible. I mean, well, I want to pause there and actually to say that depends on what's supported in terms of the exchange, but being able to manage it with your Ledger Nano S Plus in particular is 100% possible. What will we need to do? All right. So first thing is that you need to know what address you're going to receive the assets in. So this is what you're gonna tell Binance you want to receive it in. With Binance Smart Chain, because it's a EVM chain, so Ethereum Virtual Machine, you can receive that generally speaking on the address that is probably going to be the same or similar to your Ethereum address. But at the moment, it's still generally going to be better to just go through the receive process. You want to receive assets, and then you can receive them. You add an account to receive the corresponding asset on the correct network. So that's Binance Smart Chain. So you add the account for Binance Smart Chain. I'll go through the motions now, and then you've got your address. Once you have your address, then you go through to Binance. Make sure you withdraw. The main thing is to make sure you're withdrawing it on the correct Binance Smart Chain network. It might change the amount of fees that you need to pay, things like that, and all that jazz. Once that's done, it might take some time for that to be withdrawn onto the network, and then you'll be able to see that on your account. The couple of issues that you might might come across would be, hey, the value of my asset isn't appearing within the account in Ledger Live. I totally understand that can totally change the experience that you have, but it definitely doesn't affect the value of it, being that it's a Binance pegged token. It means that Binance is going to try and peg that token, that ERC BEP20 token, to the value of that asset. So you just need BNB to pay for the transaction fees on the Binance Smart Chain, and then you'll be good to go from there. If there are any tokens that we don't support within Ledger Live that you can't see at all, you might need to use a EVM compatible software or hardware wallet, and we can try and assist you with that one, with using a third-party service to potentially manage your assets. That's if it's not supported. Generally speaking, that's how you might withdraw those tokens onto an address that's managed by your Ledger Nano S Plus. I wanted to mention that in particular. It's one thing that's really kind of fun to think about, is just because of the way that I don't want to call you out in particular, Michael, but it's because you mentioned to hold it on, to send something to your Ledger Nano S Plus. It's very interesting that the Ledger Nano S itself doesn't actually hold your tokens. It doesn't hold, Ethereum, Binance BNB or anything like that, but rather it holds the recovery phrase, which derives, your private key, and from your public key is what the address comes from, and it's the relationship between the public key and the private key that allows you to sign transactions for that address. Really cool. I can talk about it for a long time. I love chatting about that in particular. Okay, Alpha mentioned also, just while I was talking about that, you sent AVAX from exchange, but you don't see it in Ledger. Okay, so first thing we note would be just to make sure, exactly right. First thing to note, you can always check. This may not always be the ultimate source, unfortunately. It sometimes gets delayed in being updated, but it is a good way to double check if something's supported. And you can see here, it is supported. It's saying it's supported in Ledger Live, right? Or it's saying it's supported with the Ledger device, but it's not supported in Ledger Live. What does that mean? It means that we'll be able to manage the asset with the addresses that we'd be able to derive from our Ledger device itself, but we might need to use a third-party application. For example, in this case, the web wallet. Now, AVAX, I've used the web wallet personally as well, and I quite like it. There's no need to, again, interact. There's no need to actually input your recovery phrase. I know it does ask that you can, but yeah, you can see here, you can select Ledger, and you can make sure to check that there. You won't see it you may not see your assets in Ledger Live, but you definitely should be able to see any AVAX assets in the web wallet at a bare minimum. Okay, so I don't have my device on me at the moment, but you'll be able to log in and check that from there. I know that there's a Help Center article about that, but if the other thing to consider is if you send AVAX, wrapped AVAX, I don't know how many wrapped versions there are on other networks. See, maybe I'll double check there, but that would be the main thing that I would consider. If it's something that you can't see within AVAX wallet, so whatever asset it might be, whether it's Avalanche specifically or it's MIM or whatever it might be, just to check with Avalanche wallet first, just because it does depend on the token in particular. There we go. So hopefully, yeah, Alf, if you do drop your ticket number here, we can try and respond to you in a more detailed manner in the actual ticket. But that would be my first thing, is especially because I have dealt with wrapped AVAX, that you also have to consider like what chain that you're sending it on to and from as well, because that can change not only like network, Binance Smart Chain network versus I think it's AVAX C chain, but also if you're sending it on the AVAX, I think it's X chain as well. I can't remember off the top of my head. I followed the instructions from your site, so is it ERC20? I normally in my when I normally interact with you guys, I normally try to grab the address to double check. So I would want to know, and if you don't want to share it here, that's fine. But if, let's say, okay, you said you followed our web instructions from our site. Not knowing what that would be in particular, ledger support, AVAX, I can make a inference. If you'd followed these steps, then you would have created your AVAX account with, you know, the web wallet. You might have sent it on, you might have, you know, created the AVAX address, you know, with the AVAX wallet. But if you sent it on Binance Smart Chain, then it's something to consider as well. So I know I've rambled a bit on about that. I don't know that I would have been able to directly solve your issue, but that would be the things that I would consider in particular. Alf. In any case, a lot was a while back. No, be sorry, Alf. I just want to make sure we can get you sorted. So if we can get you sorted, that's what we'd be hoping for, really. But again, reiterate, just before I run too much out of time, just to talk about address poisoning, please, guys, use the receive tab if you're going to send money to and from exchanges. Please don't just go into your address history. Hopefully me talking about why that's possible with regards to, you know, ERC20 tokens, those zero value transactions that you might be seeing, those don't affect the security of your account. Hopefully me explaining it in detail hopefully gives you a better idea of how that is possible and where you might be, you know, where the risk is in terms of your security profile. You know, like, do you have to worry about being attacked physically, or is it a online thing about people attacking you, attacking your system, or if that's what you're considering in terms of security. Next thing, don't interact with any random ERC721, ERC20 tokens. They could be a scam. But Alf, yeah, if you want to get a hold of us, I know someone asked us as well. If you were going to do it again, anyone, you can always go to support.ledger.com, and then the bottom right hand side there's a contact us button. You can get a hold of us there. But again, if you have the ticket number, the case number, we can always try and get a hold of you as well. Boom, just see that there. So I'll note that down, and we'll try to get a hold of you. Yeah, we'll try to get a hold of you and try to look at that just to make sure we can get you all set up, because that's the most important thing. We want you guys to be able to manage your assets. We want you guys to be able to do what you need to do with your assets, and not regardless of what it is that you need to do. You know, not your keys, not your coin. I mean, generally speaking, that does look like a case number, Alf. The address, generally speaking, as long as it's from a ledger domain, should have been okay. All right. So hopefully, if you guys have any other questions, you should have popped them into chat right now. But if you do have anything else, please let me know. I'm really here trying to go through all of the things that I think we're seeing a lot more of. I saw, you know, MetaMask tweet about address poisoning, and so it does seem like it's something that's becoming more and more common, even on the exchange, even on the networks that have a relatively high gas fee. So it's something to keep in mind in the future. Just a couple more questions. I would like to hide the HBAR on my ledger, but I'm worried about using third parties. I know that security isn't compromised, but if that is the case, how did the Solana wallets on Ledger get hacked? My understanding of, I don't know of any Solana wallets on Ledger that got hacked, but that was hacked, you know, via Ledger. So my understanding, if I think the incident that you're thinking of is the same as the one I'm thinking of, Tao, where there was a software wallet that was sending the keys, the private keys, and the mnemonics, even I think, in plain text through an API request. So that's not something that happens when you use a Ledger device. What is happening, you know, in your case when you're talking about HBAR, is my understanding is that there's an actual connection being made by the third party, because the third party is the one that manages that network or that chain in particular. And so there isn't an actual direct, there isn't a deterministic link between the address that you have in HBAR and the private keys that are generated on the device itself. So those the Solana issue was separate in my mind because of the way that the keys were being sent, is my understanding, in plain text or in general being sent, and somehow those got out. So these people potentially might have been using their recovery phrase that they got from the software wallet in the hardware wallet. Now, this is why I think I did mention it before, that if the computer is already compromised, so in this case the wallet was the one that was the source of the compromise, then it's having the ledger doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to manage those assets too. So with regards to that, hopefully, if you have already added your set up your recovery phrase the way that it's set up on the device itself, and then also making sure to keep that offline, you generally should be okay. I don't know that Solana wallet hack is relevant as long as you're managing your assets and your recovery phrase securely. How can I transfer Alice coin to Binance to Ledger? Off the top of my head, I'm not sure about Alice. It's not something that's supported. If it's if it's like an EVM token or something, ERC20, then maybe it could be something to consider. ERC20. So you might need to use a third-party app. Let me just check if it's on our list. This is on GitHub in particular, because Ledger Live does have its code up online, so you can check that you guys yourself as well. I don't know that it might take a little while to show up, because I am streaming as well. I can double check Mina at the same time as well. Hakar, when will AVAX come on Ledger Live? I don't have a direct time frame for you, unfortunately. Open Edrov. Hopefully I can get the last of these questions in. Opened Ledger Live today. My portfolio is going. I know I haven't lost anything. Can I just enter my recovery phrase and restores the previous state? No. So if everything's gone from your Ledger Live Edrov, and it could be a couple of things, and I want to be very specific. If you can't see any accounts at all, if the accounts aren't showing up, it might be that you need to add the accounts in again. The instance of Ledger Live not showing accounts isn't necessarily something that's bad, as long as they have the recovery phrase and no one else has the recovery phrase. But if the accounts have already been added and you see there's actually a transaction that's taken the funds out of the account, any asset in particular, then it might be that someone either had access to the Ledger device and the PIN, or actually access to the recovery phrase as well. Because if they have the access to the recovery phrase, they can manage it as if without your consent at all. So if this is the second time this happened, it might be something to consider. If someone either has access to the recovery phrase, time to change the recovery phrase, make sure you get a new one so that you get access to the different set of addresses, and that way you're making sure that only you have access to the recovery phrase and only you can manage to sign transactions at that address. Boom, just FYI. Okay. Where and when will Spark be available to buy? You can check with the third-party providers for that one, Frank. It might be something to consider. You can see Alice here, by the way, is available at least on the Ethereum network. I did see, and also I think it was Mina. I did think Mina should have been supported, so we'll double check that and have a look for that. Searching, it might not be the case. In terms of the email, it can be tricky because sometimes I know that scammers are actually smart enough to actually change where the emails look like they're coming from, but they're actually sending them from a different address. So it can be related to that as well. But yeah, we'll definitely have a look at that. It's like an update, and things have changed. No chance. Anyone has my recovery place? No chance at all. Okay. If it's not showing up, and if it's like an update, then definitely it would be potentially making sure that you add the accounts airdrop, make sure you have the accounts added of the corresponding assets, and going from there. That's the first thing that I would consider. It's a bit harder because I'm not next to you. I can't see a screen. That's the first thing. Second thing would be thinking about if you've changed your recovery phrase recently or anything like that as well. So just some things there. Looks like Mina might not be supported even with the counter values. I don't see it showing up. So with regards to Mina, you should, I know that there's the application at least that we do have floating around there, so you should be able to manage it at least, but you might not be able to see the counter value, so the actual value of the asset in the fiat terms. That's just about it from me. If you have any other questions, get a hold of us at support.ledger.com. We'll try to answer your questions as quickly as we can from there. Hopefully you guys learned a little bit of something. We'll do this next week as well. And going forward, yeah, get a hold of us if there's anything, any help that you need going forward. Thanks, guys.